Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about how to win at chess, and stay tuned till the end of the video because we're going to discuss another really exciting rule of chess that many players often forget. So in order to win in the game of chess, you need to checkmate your opponent. But first let's talk about something a little bit less extreme than checkmate, and that is check. So check is when you attack the opponent's king, meaning you directly pose a threat to it. So for example here, the black king is in check because the bishop is directly attacking it, and if black doesn't do anything about the situation, on the next move, white will simply capture the king. Now, capturing the king is not allowed in chess, so black is obliged to do something with this situation. Any other move, let's say moving the knight, is just an illegal move because you're neglecting the king and its safety. So there are three possibilities what black can do in this situation, what you can do when you're being checked. So one situation is that you can block the check with another piece. So let's say you block with the knight. A second possibility for you to do is to move the king. For example, you can move it over here, and now it is not in check anymore. And now the third possibility that is not possible in this position, but would, let's say, be possible in a position like this, is to capture the piece that is attacking the king. So say here you could just go ahead and capture the bishop with a pawn, and then the king is no longer in check. So remember, there's three ways to defend against a check when your king is being directly attacked. One is to block, the other is to move the king to a safe square, and the third is to capture the piece if that is possible in the case. But to win in the game of chess, you need to checkmate your opponent. And there are two very important conditions I would like you to remember for checkmate to be able to happen. Alright, so the two conditions that have to happen for checkmate can be seen in this position. The one condition is that a piece is directly attacking the king. So as you can see here, the queen is directly attacking the king because the king is under a direct threat of theoretically being captured on the next move. And the second condition of checkmate is that the king has no legal moves, because as you can see in this position, king can go here. Also, the square is attacked by the queen. King can go here. It's also attacked by the queen. And if the king captures the queen, can't do that either because the bishop's going to go ahead and capture it. Alright, so here's another example of checkmate. In this case, white is checkmated because, first of all, it is directly attacked by the rook right now, and it has simply nowhere to move. This square is guarded by the king, the black king. This square is also guarded by the black king, and this square is guarded by the black rook. So this is, again, checkmate. Now, another way that a game of chess can end in the favor of one of the players is if a player simply resigns. In some situations, the position is so hopeless that a player decides that he doesn't want to continue the game and simply just resigns. Like, let's look at this position. Black has got a queen, a rook, two knights, and a bishop, and a king, against simply a king and pawn. And it is very, very difficult for white to carry on this game and put up even the slightest battle. And so very often in a position like this, a player will just go ahead and resign. Resignation is equivalent to checkmate. If one player resigns, the other wins. There is, however, a third outcome in chess, and that outcome is a draw. And there are 5 possibilities for a draw to occur, and the two most common ones are the ones that I would really like you to remember. Right, so one of the two very common ways how a draw can happen in chess is by agreement. This is when one player offers a draw and the other agrees to it. Usually this happens in positions when both players realize that the position is equal and there are really not many resources to try and win the game. Like, for example, here, both sides have got 3 pawns, both sides have got a bishop each, the position is very quiet, there's not many threats, not many pieces that can be captured, pawns are not close to be promoted, as we discussed, that pawns can turn themselves into rooks or even queens. And simply the players can come to the conclusion that this position is very equal and they'll just decide to agree to a draw. So a second very common way how draws occur in chess, which I would like you to remember, is stalemate. Stalemate is very similar to checkmate, but there is one crucial difference, and that is that the king is not under attack. So here you can see the black king has no squares to go. Black has no legal moves to make. If there were other pieces on the board, say there were a knight, this wouldn't be stalemate because the knight could move around. But black has absolutely no legal moves to make in this position. However, the king is not under direct attack, neither from the queen nor from any other piece that may be on the board. And this kind of a scenario is a stalemate, and therefore a draw automatically occurs. Alright, there are 3 other possibilities how a draw can occur in chess, and they're not as important and as common as the first 2 that I just mentioned, but they're also pretty good to keep in mind. So one of these is the impossibility of checkmate. In this case, you can see that checkmate is impossible because of what is called a dead position. Simply no progress can be made. Pawns cannot be promoted into queens or rooks that could later deliver checkmate. Kings cannot capture these pawns, and the kings can just keep moving around. Pawns are completely locked in. You're going to have kings moving around, and for example, the black king can't walk further than his own camp because everything is guarded by the white pawns. This square is guarded by a white pawn. This one is also guarded by a white pawn. This one is. And similarly for the white king. All of these routes are closed, and so this is the dead position. Impossibility of checkmate can also occur due to what is referred to as insufficient material. So firstly, we can have a king versus a king, and here checkmate is impossible. There are simply not enough resources for this to happen. And there's 3 other situations where insufficient material can come into play. Again, these are not critical to remember, but also quite good to keep in mind as they do occur in games rather frequently. Another scenario can be a king and a bishop versus a king. This is not enough to deliver checkmate. There's no way to checkmate the black king here, especially the white king. King and knight versus king. Also, this is not enough. And another very interesting scenario. This is when both sides have a bishop, given that the bishops are of the same color, because as you know, bishops only move on diagonals, so that we have dark squared bishops which operate on the dark diagonals, and we have light squared bishops which operate on the light diagonals. And so if both bishops are either dark squared or both are light squared, checkmate is also impossible. Alright, another possibility of a draw in chess is what is referred to as the 50 move rule. And the 50 move rule is a very interesting rule when both sides have made 50 moves each, and there have been no pawn moves and no captures. So let's take a look at this position. This position is winning for white. White can theoretically checkmate the black king, and black cannot do anything about this if white plays correctly. But let's say that the white player is not very experienced, and he runs into difficulties doing so. So he tries to checkmate the black king, but this just doesn't work, and he doesn't know how to do it. So if after 50 moves of both sides, there are no pawn moves, because in this case there are just no pawns on the board, and no captures, and of course no checkmate, one of the players can claim a draw. This draw doesn't happen automatically, but if a player is counting and they have counted that there have been 15 moves without pawn promotions and without captures, they can claim a draw to the other player, and it will automatically be a draw then. And the final scenario where a draw occurs is also, it has to be claimed by one of the players, but a draw occurs if there is what is referred to as threefold repetition. And threefold repetition is when the same position occurs 3 times on the board. So let's say we've got this position, and white makes a move with the knight here from d2 to e4, and the black knight plays from d8 to c6, and now white and black decide to go back. And then they go back again, and then they go back again. And as we can see, this position has occurred 3 times already, and so therefore one player is allowed to claim a draw, and in this case, the game immediately ends in a tie. Alright, and now it is time for that really fascinating special rule of chess that so many players forget about. Even at the intermediate level, very often the fact that players disregard this rule can have really grand effects on the outcomes of games. And this rule is called en passant, which from French translates as passing by. So en passant occurs when a pawn makes its first move, and specifically 2 squares forward, like here. And when it has made the 2 squares forward, if there is a pawn of the opponent's camp that is standing right next to it on the right or on the left, so as you can see here, directly to the right on the adjacent square, we have got a white pawn. The pawn can capture in this fascinatingly interesting way. It can capture diagonally, although the black pawn is not on that square. So it captures diagonally and removes this pawn. It's a very fascinating rule. So 2 squares forward moves a pawn, and the opponent's camp's pawn, if it is standing on an adjacent square, right or left, and can capture in this very interesting way, diagonally, but although the opponent's pawn is not standing on that square, but rather next to it. This, however, can only occur, and remember this is very important, this can only occur on the first move. So let's say my opponent played this, and now I have been presented with a choice. I can either play en passant, or I can, let's say, play king to g3 for whatever reason I want. Well, if I play king to g3, then on the next move, I no longer have the privilege to play en passant. So en passant, I have to play it immediately on the first move that the opportunity has been presented to me. Alright, that is it for this video. Like, comment, subscribe. I really hope that you enjoyed, and do check out the video number 3 that is linked right over here, where we'll talk about how to start the game off on the right foot.